Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Conversations with Authors. This is our second series of this special opportunity to meet New York Times bestselling authors and learn all about their books and about the authors who write them. I'm Ann Crawford. I'm your host. I am the Assistant Manager and Adult Services Librarian at the Ponte Vedra Beach Branch Library in Florida. Last year, I had the pleasure of interviewing Nita Prose of The Maid, Nina Dagremont of The Christie Affair, and Brendan Slocum of The Violin Conspiracy. And today, I have the privilege of interviewing Rebecca Serle of One Italian Summer. Perhaps you have read this wonderful book. I hope that you have. If you have not, please be aware that this is a spoiler-laden chat. We're going to talk about all the things. We're going to talk about the ending. We're going to talk about the plot twist. We're going to talk about, was the plot twist originally intended, or did it come later in a further on draft? All those different burning questions that our readers have. I'd like to thank a few people before we get started. First, everyone who is part of this Zoom today, as well as anyone who decides to watch this video after it's recorded. It eventually will be on St. Johns County Public Library System's YouTube channel. I'd like to thank the Friends of the Ponte Vedra Beach Branch Library who got us our own Zoom account and boosted our attendance number, which was wonderful. They also bought copies of all of Rebecca Serle's books in print, audiobook, and downloadable formats for you to borrow with your St. Johns County Library card. And of course, last but not least, our wonderful author, Rebecca Serle, who has joined us today to be interviewed by all of these questions that the Book Lovers Book Club of the Ponte Vedra Beach Branch Library gave me to ask. So without further ado, please welcome our author, Rebecca Serle.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here today. Hi, friends.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself as an author, as a person, just so we know exactly who we're talking to before we dive on in.
Absolutely. My name is Rebecca Serle. I'm an author. I have been for the last 12 years, maybe even longer than that, actually. I sold my first book in 2012. I can't do math. What is that? Yeah, about 11 or 12 years. I write full time, and I'm very lucky to do so. I sort of feel like I've been a writer since I could put words on a page or understood what words were or could read or any of those things. And so I am just very blessed that I get to make this my life. I'm very lucky.
Well, that's wonderful. We get to look forward to learning more about you and what drove you to be an author. So we're just going to go ahead and dive on in. And speaking of authors, do you have any favorite authors that you enjoy reading?
Yes, I do. I mean, I'm lucky that so many of my friends are authors, and so many people I admire are now friends. So my really dear friend is Gabrielle Zevin, who I'm sure many of you have read her work, including her big bestseller currently, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. I love her. I've loved her YA. I love AJ Fikry and Young Jane Young and everything she's written. I tell her all the time, I think she's one of our greatest living novelists. And so I'm very lucky to both get to read and also be read by her, because she gives me a lot of really great feedback. And then I have, I can just say the books that I really loved last year. I really loved Lessons in Chemistry, which I'm sure a lot of people read. I really loved The Latecomer by Jean Horowitz. Now I'm blanking on her name. Jean Han. She wrote the plot and the book that The Undoing was based off of, and The Latecomer is, I can't read thrillers. I'm way too much of a chicken. So The Latecomer is just like a really sort of in-depth family saga, and I absolutely loved it. And I just love the way she weaves plot. So yeah, and Kevin Wilson, I really love his books too. I read those I can never remember the title, the one with the fire children. I loved it. So I mean, I read a lot. I like to read a whole bunch of different things. And I'm always like, if anybody wants to chat, to put in the chat, like what you're reading lately and really loving, I'm always down for recommendations. I'm currently reading Pineapple Street.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, well, the good thing is that all the authors you mentioned, and I too was blanking a moment for who wrote the plot but I know that we have that book, and we have the book that was based on the miniseries that inspired the miniseries, I should say, for The Undoing and everything like that. And what's been really interesting about Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow is that it's one of those books that has managed to connect our Gen Z generation with our boomers.
Yeah.
My mother's book club read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, and then I have teenagers and 20-somethings coming in and borrowing the book, and it's kind of like when worlds collide. So I thought that was really, really clever. So you know, they say that one of the things, at least from what I understand, one of the things that helps you be a great writer is to read all sorts of different kinds of writing styles, and then it inspires you to kind of find your own voice when you're writing. And our readers want to know what first inspired you to write, and how did you come to discover what kind of books you wanted to write?
The first book I ever remember reading where I felt like, oh, I want to do this was Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I read it, and it was the first book I had ever read. I mean, I was quite young, so I wasn't really reading like emotional novels per se. I was probably a little bit too young to read Wuthering Heights, but I remember just the depth of feeling in that book. And I remember thinking, whatever this is, I want to do this. I want to make people feel this. And yeah, I mean, it just grew from there, but I credit Wuthering Heights for being the first book where I was like, what is this alchemy? This is just some kind of magic. And I want to participate in what this is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love that your books have that magical realism thread going through them, which seems to be growing in popularity. I seem to see more books that are positing that what if. And that was the big question in this book, because initially when I read the book, and I think when some of our readers read the book, they're like, well, I don't know how your 30-year-old mother who's passed away comes onto the scene, but okay, I'm down with that. And I remember when I turned the page and realized, no, the 30-year-old mother didn't pop into the future. The daughter popped into the past. I had to sit there with the book. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to read this. Like, read it like 3 times before I was like, did this really happen?
Yeah.
How did I miss all those clues? Were there clues that you were leaving in the story that kind of hinted that we were back in the 90s and we just missed them? Or
it's interesting because when I was writing the book, I sort of felt like the way my relationship with magical realism is very sort of like, I like that there's a magical element in the story, but I don't ever dwell on it, the mechanics of it, because I don't write sci-fi. I don't write none of that is interesting to me. The only thing that is interesting is the possibilities that get opened up by having this be a magical realism story. For instance, you could tell a story about a young woman who goes to Italy, the place where her mom was, and she meets people who her mom knew, and she discovers people like a man who her mom loved, and she finds letters of her mother's. But why not just have her mom be there? To me, it's the more interesting version of the story. So I like magical realism because it can just sort of like cut to the quick in this way that sometimes the normal, the world cannot. But that being said, I really didn't, the way I saw her meeting with her mom is that, like, as I was writing the book, I felt like, okay, well, Katie is just on her trip to Italy. And when she encounters Carol, it's like this watercolor time that maybe like takes her out of, out of the time that she's in. But I couldn't really like kind of totally figure that out. And I was like, what is it? Like, are readers going to understand this? And I wasn't. And then I got to that scene where Katie and Carol are together, and she says, like, I have a meeting with somebody, and I just wrote his name is Adam. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, wow, this whole thing is taking place in the past. But I was very much on that ride with all of you. Like, I didn't know. And then this is the magic of writing. And I'm not saying magic realism. I'm saying like the actual magic of writing a novel is that I went back and everything was written that way. Like, there were no cell phones. There were no, like, it was so obvious that this whole thing had been taking place in the 90s. I just even as the author hadn't realized it.
Wow, that is totally brilliant. And it makes me feel so much better, because I was like, did she leave me breadcrumbs and I just didn't follow along? How on earth did I possibly miss this? But, you know, the beauty in that, like, discovering the story along with the reader, but because you didn't put all these precise rules in place, there were no rules to break, if that makes sense.
That's
so
right.
that really worked to your advantage.
That's
because
exactly
when the book club talked about it, they thought the point at which she flipped was when Eric, but you're saying maybe when she flipped back was the point at which she met her mom. And I like that there's all these different possibilities of when the slide through time happened, and that you don't have to get consumed with that and lose the, well, you know, the pun would be lose the plot, but lose the point of the story because you're getting all to the rules.
Completely. I mean, ultimately, it doesn't really matter, right? Like, ultimately, the heart of the story is the heart of the story, and sort of like the mechanics of the exact why or not, they don't matter that much.
Oh, absolutely. I was just thrilled because I have such a close relationship with my own mother, and I thought about, you know, whenever I read books that are set in the past, and I have to tell you, I was like, oh my gosh, the 90s is considered the past. Oh my Lord, how old am I? But I love the idea of being a mother myself, meeting your own before you're even fully a glint in their eye. Now, originally, of course, I thought she went to Italy and she hadn't had her baby yet. But even when you're in that first year, you still haven't fully made the switch. You're kind of like got one foot in the past, one foot in the present. And to meet your parent before that's who they are and know them as a person, I thought was a beautiful concept.
You know, this is written in the acknowledgments in the back of the book, but the year that I was 23, 3 of my best friends lost their mothers to breast cancer in the span of like 6 months. It happened just really quickly. And one of my really dear friends, and I write this in the acknowledgments, Stephanie Marchand, she said to me, it was right after her mother passed. And she said, I miss all of the women in her that I never got to know. Like, I miss her at 5, and I miss her at 15, and I miss her at 80. Like, I'm going to cry. Like, I miss not just my mom, but all of the women that she was, that I didn't get to spend time with or experience. And I always thought about that idea. Like, I remember just like holding that spark so close and thinking like how beautiful that was, because what she was really saying is like, I miss that woman, not just the mother that I knew, but I miss this human being. And I always just thought about that. That always just seemed so both vulnerable and like deeply generous, that statement, that idea.
That person that's kind of anchored you to life, that, you know, I think for Katie, and I relate so much, was kind of that, kind of like the sun in her universe that all things kind of revolved around, and to lose that center of gravity and just feel completely unmoored. It's a scary thing, because, you know, that person is your world from the time that you're born. And if you have a close relationship with your mom, you think about, what questions should I have asked before I didn't have the chance to ask them? And I guess, well,
and there's no way to prepare for that, right? Like, there's no way to ask all the questions. Like, there's always going to be more. You're always going to want more time. There's always going to be questions you want answered that you never, you know, even if you sat and did interviews for 10 years, you would never like fully get there. And I think there's this book, Motherless Daughters, that talks about how when your mother passes away, it's really the first time, regardless of what age you are, right? Whether you're young or you're young in your 20s, like my friends, or you're in your 70s. My mom was very lucky to have her mother for a very, very long time. You're like both abandoned, like you're orphaned, and also you are who you are for the first time. Like that, when that thread gets cut, you are a self-sustaining human being. Like really almost from like a biological level, it's like your mother feeds you and she carries you. And then when you're young and all of these things, and like when she goes, you are sort of an individual in this world for the first time in a way that you have never been before. And that is both like deeply tragic and alarming because you've lost that source of unconditional love. And then also there is an empowering side to that, which I think is like part of what her journey is.
And that's one of the things that the book club talked about and that we love so much, is that it was kind of a journey for her to find herself as her own woman.
Yes.
It was a journey as simple as, I'm climbing these stairs and I'm sweating to death and I'm drinking bottles and bottles of water, but every day my body is getting stronger, my spirit is getting stronger.
Yes.
We even pulled the thread that you could go as far as to say, look at how she could have canceled this trip. She could have taken her husband had the dynamic been different. She could have taken a friend, but instead she shows that, hey, if you're a woman and you want to go on a big trip, do it.
Yeah.
You don't need another person there to hold you up. You can venture out on your own and be your own person, and that in of itself is a really empowering thing.
Absolutely. And listen, like everyone has a different journey of self-discovery. Like Katie is a woman who has never really been alone. And so part of her journey of like stepping into her growth and who she is and what this next phase of her life is going to be, is she has to learn how to be alone. She has to learn how to sort of just like sit with herself and have experiences alone. But everyone's journey to that is different, so I think like for Katie, it's really important to take that step by herself and to start to figure out who she is, separate from her mother and separate from her husband as well.
Oh, absolutely. And we've got lots of questions about the husband and the dad in here, and different things, and I'm just going to go ahead and dive into
please,
them.
Please.
The first question that the book club had asked me was, did you, when you were writing this story, because now you've told me that the story kind of unveiled itself to you, so I'm curious if this kind of unveiled itself as well. Did you ever consider Carol getting the job, whereby then if she got the job and she turned it down, it would then have been a sacrifice that she deliberately made to go back? Was that ever a possibility?
No, there were a lot of things that were possibilities, but I never really considered that one, because it's an interesting question. I think let me put it a different way. To me, it wasn't really about her getting the job or not getting the job. It was about her choice to stay or to go. And I think that the choice to stay or to go for me was sort of separate from whether or not she got the job. The whole thing with her, redecorating the Sierra News. And I have to say to all of you, as I'm talking, I don't know if everyone on this chat is aware, but we sold film rights to One Italian Summer, and I did a draft of the script. And the script is a little bit different than the book. And so because the script is the thing that is more present in my mind, I'm having a really challenging time right now remembering like what is book plot and what is script plot. So I'm trying to stay as close as I can, but now I'm thinking about the job and I'm like, did she? So anyway, if I get it a little bit fuzzy, it's not because I don't know my work. It's because we took like a few small departures in the script, and that's the closest thing in my brain right now. So anyhow, but the whole deal with her with the job was really like, to me, it was just never about whether she got it or not. It was really about Katie getting to see her mother in this like empowered role, and also to realize so much of the book is about Katie not new things happening, but Katie recognizing the truth of what always was. Her mother was always a decorator. Her mother always had success in that area, but she didn't recognize it because she just saw her as her mother. Just like Katie was making choices for her own life. Like she loved Eric and she chose him of her own accord, but she's been ascribing that power to her mom. So part of it is her just like seeing and recognizing this empowered working woman in her mother, and giving her some credit for the work that she's always done.
And we had appreciated that, getting to know a person, whatever their role is in your life beyond just how their role relates back to you, who
Yes.
their role is in the wider sense of the word, in the wider sense of the world. I think when the book club was asking this question, they were thinking about along the same lines as you, but also they were thinking about with her getting the job, they felt like, well, she got the job and then she deliberately said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go back to my child. That would make it, that would somehow make the choice more, not authentic, but I guess just more deliberate.
Yeah.
But it sounds like from what you're describing is that really, job or no job, she had to decide for herself, am I going back to my life or not? And that was independent of whether or not she got offered the job. It wasn't like, oh, I didn't get offered the job, I guess I'll go back. It's what you're saying, and I agree, is that job or no job, I can't stay here. I need to go back to my family. That's my
Yeah.
child needs me, and
Yeah.
that's an authentic
Yeah.
choice. And I like that better because to me that feels more girl power. I have a daughter, an 11-year-old, so I'm always talking about girl power and about,
Sweet.
choosing not what someone maybe is saying that you should make the choice for, but choosing for yourself, which is something I love that Katie discovers, that she has that power within her. She has that confidence and she can make those choices for herself without her mom, because her mom helped instill that confidence in her, even if she wasn't ready to embrace it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like to think that they sort of like they help each other return home, like Katie helps
Right.
make that choice, and then Carol helps Katie make it too by sort of saying like yes, I think this man is the right person for you. And so I like to think that they sort of like help each other find their way back.
And I like that it's a two-pronged process, and that it's not just, as a mother myself, empowering your child to feel confident and going out into the wider world and making choices for themselves, but that child also has to realize, I can do this. I've been given the tools. I can be brave. I may not make all the same choices that maybe my mother would have made or she would have told me made, but she has raised me to be able to think for myself, even if I think in the beginning for Katie, it was just easier to let her mom. She put her mom on such a pedestal that it was just easier to let this perfect person just figure everything out for her rather than, figuring it out for herself. So I'm glad she got to that point in the end. I was like, that was really good. So that was exciting. Now, I do know that when we were discussing the book last Friday, that some of the members felt that the way Katie's and Carol's relationship was, from the way Katie described it, which of course isn't necessarily what it was, it's how Carol was viewing it, that it seemed unhealthy in some ways, that there weren't enough boundaries there. Would you agree with that assessment, or is that just Katie's perspective on it, or was that the reality?
I mean, I think yes. I mean, I think perhaps there's definitely a little bit of a codependence on it, but I'm always hesitant to say that deep intimacy between women is unhealthy, because I just think that we are so unaccustomed to seeing that, to seeing it like described or written or talked about. I think that we as a culture are like sort of really obsessed with individuality and not always so obsessed with connection in a way that other cultures are. And so I agree that I think that there is work for Katie to do to sort of like differentiate herself and to grow up. But I really I think ultimately having that kind of closeness is a really beautiful boon for your life and your heart, and happily Katie does do the work of trying to grow up a little bit and to understand that like her mother has given her a lot of the tools that she needed, even if she didn't give her all of them. But I don't know if anyone on here has read my last novel in 5 years. It's a it's a love story between two best friends. And people will often say that to me, that Danny and Bella, those are the two characters in 5 years, relationship is codependent or, you know, problematic. And I think like maybe a little bit, but I also, you know, what I said, I think we're just really unaccustomed to seeing really deep intimacy between women. And I have that with my mom, and there's plenty of like, just to get personal for a second, like I'm getting married and there's plenty.
Yay.
That's so nice. Thank you. And there's plenty of stuff of like my mom. I mean, it took a very long time. I was single for a very, very long time, which, you know, it's a conversation for another time. We can talk about that elements of my journey. But my mom has like really been that person in my life in a lot of ways. And you know, I guess you can make the argument that I didn't meet someone now because like she had that space or whatever you want to say, but I just ultimately feel really grateful for that level and that depth of connection that I've been able to receive. So I guess a little bit of both, but listen, let me put it to you this way. I would always say that more closeness is better than less. Oh, I just lost you.
2009. So, oh gosh, how long have I been married for? 14 years.
Mm-hmm.
What a journey. If my husband ever watches this video, I love you, but what a journey. It's a balancing act because for me, being so close to my mom, I want to honor that person. I want to honor that woman who has been my hero ever since I was a small child.
Yes.
And yet at the same time, and I know deep down she feels this way too, I wanted to honor the woman that she raised to go out into the world.
Right.
And I think it is that juggling act. And I think I related to Katie because on the one hand, you don't want to feel like not taking somebody's advice or not letting your mom help guide some of your decisions. You don't want to hurt that person's feelings or suggest that you were ungrateful because you were so grateful.
Yes.
And yet at the same time, especially once you get married, you know, then that person is kind of thinking they're your orbit, you know, in your universe, and finding that balance where your husband isn't feeling like, well, my goodness, your mother's just running the show.
Yes.
And at the same time, you don't want to get married and feel like, okay, mom, now you just step back and just
completely,
you know, get out of the picture. It's
balance. I remember one of my really dear friends from college was getting married. This is quite a few years ago, and she was on a plane, and there was a lot of turbulence on a flight. And this was, I mean, maybe it was like 10 years ago, and there was. I don't think they have them so much in the newer planes, but you know how there's sometimes those phones that are like built into the seat backs, like the emergency phone that's like for an emergency. They don't have them that so much anymore. But anyway, I remember she said to me, there was all this turbulence on the plane, and she looked at the phone and said, if I have one phone call to make, this is bleak, but if I have one phone call to make, like I would want it to be to my mom, but I guess now it has to be to Matt, who was her husband, who was her fiance. And that sentiment also always really stuck with me. This idea of like, it has to be him now, but the both sort of like beauty and also heartbreak of allowing it to be him and understanding that it's not her anymore.
Right. And it is tough. It is tough because, you know, you again, you want to honor that relationship that brought you into the world, that protected you, that loved you, that raised you, that for whom that person would die for you. And at the same time, you want to honor this person that you made vows to, and that, you know, is pledging their life to you, that is embracing the woman you are now.
Yes.
You know, that's heard about your childhood, but sees you as an adult. And there's beauty in both of those relationships. And fortunately, my mom and my husband get along really well, like peas and carrots. So it's usually me being the conflicted one that's kind of causing the internal drama. It's not the.
They're like aligned. I know. My mom's always like, stop being so hard on him. Like you're always, you know. Yes. And I'm like, well, why do you not remember that, like, you know, we have to like unload the dishwasher a particular way? And he's like, it doesn't really matter how it gets unloaded. And I'm like, yes. I guess these are all like, I mean, you guys can weigh in, but I feel like these are all like very normal domestic arguments, but where I'm like, everything in my house has been exactly as I wanted it. And now there's someone else here and you're like messing up all my stuff.
And it's really hard because if I come off a, really tough day, I know I can vent to my mom. We get
Yes.
that XX chromosome stuff going
Yes.
on, we hear each other. Whereas with my husband, like many Y chromosomes out there, they just want solutions. Totally. They're just like, how are we fixing this? What's the problem here? It's like, I'm not there yet. I just want to pull it out. So it's good to have both of those people in your life. Appreciate at the end, Katie gave her mother enough grace to be a human being, not be a mythical figure, but could forgive her and recognize her as a human being. And in the same breath with her husband, recognize him as a person with feelings and wants and desires, and honor him a fully fleshed out person.
That's
and
right.
So I really admire that growth that she had. We had a little discussion in our group about Adam. We have I don't care what time period you were in. You ring on it. What says, and then others who are like, haven't you read Outlander before? He wasn't even born. How does it count? So we had to.
I know. I will say, like, I find this very interesting because it comes up in 5 years as well. That like the idea, infidelity for some reason makes readers very uncomfortable in ways that murder doesn't seem to, or like, like other things in thrillers, or like infidelity is a really hard one for readers. And what I always say, of course, is that like, it is entirely disinteresting to write about perfect human beings. That they don't make interesting characters. They don't make for like a particular interesting plot. And so I never pretend to write about perfect human beings. And to me, like the most interesting thing about people is not that they like make all the right choices, but how they move through the choices that they make and what they ultimately glean from them and what they learn from the choices that they make. And so yeah, but I always find this interesting about this particular element of infidelity.
I think it's because perhaps, and I guess maybe I'm hoping, perhaps readers can further distance themselves from murder because they think that's such an extreme thing. Whereas infidelity is a much more relatable human, we're all human beings. That's something much more possible. That could happen. And what does that mean? And what does that suggest? And if I'm putting myself in the shoes of a character, that's saying about my life. And because I love that every person who reads a book is going to read it through their own filter. You're going to get a little bit different things that you pull out. But at one, we were discussing, is Adam real or not? And if he's real, did Katie coming into his life change his trajectory?
Right. Yeah.
We want to know.
Well, I mean, okay, I say this a lot, and I really do think it's true. Once a book is published, it doesn't just belong to me, it belongs to all of you. So I will give you my point of view, but I would not necessarily say my point of view is any more or less relevant than yours, Dana, yours, Jones, or yours, Jan's. It's just mine. I think that everything that happens in my books is real. So I think that, Danny did live 5 years in the future, and in 5 years, I think Katie really did spend, a summer with her mom as 30 years old. I think Adam's real. Like I believe in all of that. And I think like, particularly at the end, when she's talking to Monica and she asks about Adam, and she says like, oh yeah, he did eventually like meet someone, and they used to come back here. And so, and I think that, Adam and Katie are drawn together by like a very particular circumstance, but also there's like a really big opposites attract. She is somebody for whom like life has been this real nucleus of family. It's just been her and her mom and her dad and Eric, and she, in like a 5 square blocks of Los Angeles. And Adam is somebody for whom home is a thing that he is constantly trying to escape, that he's been like really running from. And so I think like he helps her open up her world, and she helps him understand that like maybe it would be nice to at some point in his life have a touchstone, have somewhere to just sort of like rest and be and stop moving. Yeah, but no, to me, he's definitely real.
I thought so by that hint that you gave at the end, but I like again that the story is open-ended enough. It could go any myriad of ways. It's kind of like what came first, the chicken or the egg. Did Carol always decide to go home? Did Adam always decide to get married? Or did that trajectory change because Katie was there? Or was it that Katie was just kind of realizing how things were unfolding? I like that it's not specific, because I don't think life is specific.
No, it's not.
I mean, you don't get the bird's eye view and get to see all the moving pieces all at one time. You only get your own square of real estate. And
That's
sometimes it's the distance really see it.
Yes.
But it is. So I thought that was, if that was intentional or unintentional, that was a really smart move on your part.
Great.
Kind of leave it open-ended. And we were interested as readers, so, we had some that had read in 5 years, someone else had read The Dinner List. So they're like, ooh, I want to go back and read the other books. Would you is its own character in your stories, and what do you like to share using time as a tool in your writing, if that makes sense?
Sorry, you broke up for a quick second there. You're asking like the relationship to time in my books?
Yes, we think it's a really interesting element that you use to tell your stories. What is your intention when you use time kind of as a structure to explore in your stories?
Well, I think time is just such a it's so fundamental to our experience as human beings. I mean, it's really like, it's hard for me to tell stories about fate or destiny and to not have them be stories about time, because they are. I mean, ultimately all stories are stories about time, how much we have, how we spend it, all of those things. So I was really interested in The Dinner List was really about sort of the fantasy of getting to go back in time and like relitigate the past in a lot of ways, open it up and say like, did this have to happen, and why did this happen, and like, was this for the best or the worst, and sort of like, take inventory of a decade of choices. And then in 5 years was about the fantasy of getting to move forward in time, and the idea that even if we can see what's coming, we can't always see what it will mean. And One Italian Summer, I think, is really the fantasy of getting to recapture time with someone that we love. So I don't know. I'm interested in fate versus free will. I'm interested in how much do we control in life and how much is going to happen regardless of what we do or the choices we make, and sort of how do we determine which is which, what is what, how much power do we have, and all of those ideas ultimately come back to the structures of time, really. So it feels very organic.
I like to use time as a verb, that, recapturing time or moving forward in time or moving backwards in time. And to me, with time as a verb, it's always kind of that proverbial question that I enjoy exploring, which is what if?
Yes.
Just that leaping off point of what if this, and how does that impact you? How does that change your trajectory? Does it change your trajectory?
Yes.
Do you see things the same, or because of this exposure to a different experience, does it move you in a totally different direction?
Right.
So I think that was one of the things that attracted me to One Italian Summer, besides the mother-daughter element, which of course I love because I was very relatable, was that idea of how interesting it would be to just look back at a period of time before before you, like I said, before you were a glint in your parents' eyes,
Yes.
who were they? Who
Yeah.
were they independent of you? I don't think it's spoilers because the movie came out in 1988.
Right.
But I love the scene in Field of Dreams where
Yeah.
the dad walks onto the baseball field. The music starts and I'm bawling. The
Yeah.
tears are already all over the place. And I love how Kevin Costner's character says, he doesn't have any idea who I am. I'm not even on his radar at this
Yes.
point. He is his own man with dreams and hopes and ambitions. And just to have that experience, to meet him as a man rather than as my dad with maybe all this history attached.
That's
so
right.
that was something I really enjoyed in the story. Getting to know, because I thought it was interesting. Anytime Katie would be like, I can't believe she asked me that, or what do you mean she's telling me to think for myself, or what do you think? Trust your own opinion. And then she comes to start to realize in her own way, her mother has been telling her that, but she had to be ready to grasp that.
That's right.
Yeah, it's not enough for someone to tell you that. You have to then take that and decide, what am I going to do with it?
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed that. But I did say that the real heartbreaking moment in the book for me, and I think several of the readers, was when of course you realized that she had been abandoned. When you were writing that, did you write it in the sense that you felt like being abandoned impacted her as as an infant, or that did Carol create this kind of perfect persona to kind of make up for the fact that she wasn't there? I'm surprised that you're not married with kids of your own, because you wrote it so well. You wrote it like someone who.
That's so kind. I think maybe part of Carol's mythology to herself is like being this like sort of like, making up for it a little, being this like perfect mom, like coming home and being like, I'm going to do everything right. But also ultimately the book is about, like we're talking about, it's about the humanization of our parents. Like part of the way Katie can ultimately grieve is by understanding that she hasn't lost a God, she's lost a human being, she's lost a person. And so the idea that her mother left her as an infant is sort of like this cardinal sin, but it's kind of the only thing that really could wake Katie up to the realities of her mom being imperfect. And we all go through this as children, that like you get to a stage when you realize like, oh, my parents don't have all the answers. Like this is their first time doing life too. They just don't know everything, and they make mistakes and they screw up, and they don't have, I think in a lot of ways, if you talk about sort of growth generation over generation, we end up knowing more than our parents did. Like we end up like furthering the life lessons of our lineage, all of those things, they only have the tools that they have. And so, there's also this parallel. Katie really feels like Carol's death, and this is of course very common when people pass away. Katie really feels like Carol abandoned her. And so there's this like parallel to Carol abandoning her as an infant. But of course now, like Katie is not an infant. She's a grown woman, and she is capable of moving forward without her mom in a way that maybe baby Katie was not, And so, but there is this like parallel, after she leaves mom, and it's that night, and it's pouring rain and all of these things, and she like that night unfolds, and she says like, how could you leave? Like she's just a little girl, and she's talking about herself. Like she's talking about herself now. How could you die? How could you leave? Like I'm not ready yet.
I mean, see, that's a whole nother layer of it. I got so stuck on, you left me as a baby and you never let me know that was so. And so I built up this larger than life image of you. I didn't think about the parallel to that she's also speaking about herself in the present tense of how could you do the most disastrous thing of all, which is to permanently leave, where you can't come back. So see, this is another great reason to want to talk to the author. They unveil new layers, they peel new layers of the onion, if you will, for people to consider that maybe as a baby she didn't necessarily have, Katie didn't necessarily have the impact of the abandonment. Maybe that was more on Carol's side, but now Katie does, because Carol has left permanently. Right. See, I feel like I'm unveiling new vistas. Here. So this is really good. But that was a hard part of the book. And I remember in the circle of ladies I was speaking to, many of which are older than me, and they were saying, the question becomes, how much do you tell your children? Because as you said, I'm at that age where I have a middle school daughter where it seems like we're learning that mama has all manner of faults.
Right.
It's like we went from one trajectory all the way to the other end.
Right.
Whereas I think I liked where I was before, where I was like mythical, like a unicorn. But it does bring the question of, how much do you tell your children? When is the right time to tell them? Is there a right time to tell them? And so it's interesting, that wasn't something that was ever revealed to Katie in life. And when she had to step back from her hurt, her own personal feelings of injury, she had to think about, well, why might my mom have kept that back? Was that something she was ashamed of? Was that something she was constantly trying to make up for in her life? And I meant, there were tears when she said, something, it was something to the effect of, did I really leave you? And she's like, no, you never did. Oh, if that's not in the movie, I'm not going.
No, don't worry, we'll put that in.
It better be in there, oh my goodness. But I love that they got to take their trip after all, and that, even though it wasn't quite how she imagined it, they still got to take it together. I have to admit, we were all a little fearful that Carol's just going to disappear off the page at some point. I think maybe if we realized she went back, we'd realize that she wasn't going to,
completely
go away. But to talk about the men in Katie's life, we found it interesting that the dad and Eric were much more two-dimensional characters than both of the women were. The women were much more fully realized, which we're thinking was intentional. They were asking if, why did the dad not intervene to make Katie more independent, or was Carol just kind of a larger than life persona, in which case she was kind of the sun and the husband was like the moon? Would you agree with that?
Well, I think that they're more two-dimensional. I mean, sort of by virtue of the fact that the story isn't really about them, and also we don't spend that much time with them. We don't really get to know them as particularly like nuanced human beings, because it's not a book about, it's just not a book about Chuck or Eric. It's a book about Carol and Katie. And so I think that, I think like, to me, Carol was a little bit of a larger than life personality. And I think her husband really worshiped her in maybe like similar ways to the way Katie worships her mom. But I also think, my dad has a little bit of this also. Like, my dad is so proud of the connection and the love that my mom and I have. And even when he feels a little bit left out of it, which he definitely does and has expressed to us on occasion, like, how come you guys don't tell me that? Or how come I don't get to go on that trip, or whatever it is? I see that it's a great source of pride for him, our connection, and like the depth of our connection, that like his women have that. And so I think that Katie's father had a little bit of that too. I would say that he probably was really very touched by and very like awed by, in a lot of ways, the deep love between them.
Absolutely, because as you said, I think in the blurb that you had here inside the book, that it really is a love story between the mother and the daughter, rather than the mother and the father, or the daughter and her husband. So when you think of it in relation to that, it makes sense who the characters are
Yeah.
at the forefront, to the extent that we were thinking, are Eric and Katie a next generation version of Katie's dad and Carol? Is it Katie unintentionally mimicking
Right.
that relationship? She's replicating it. I thought that was really interesting.
I think that there's definitely parallels, but to me, they're different people. And I think part of the message of the book is that, like, Katie's going to do it differently, and she's empowered to do that now. Like, she will take things from her mom, but she's never going to be Carol, just in the way that we take things from our mothers, and we hope to emulate their good qualities, but also we have to ultimately live the life that's meant for us. I've said often in the promotion of this book that one of the really important things about this novel is the idea that no one knows the blueprint for our lives better than we do, not even our own mothers. And that Katie really begins to understand what her life is and what her priorities are and what matters to her. And some of that's going to look similar to Carol's and some of it isn't, but that's sort of the point.
I think she points that out in the book herself, about, that her mother could have had whatever reservations she had about her husband and her getting married, which you start to realize in the book is kind of her projecting a little bit of her own life onto her daughter.
Yes.
Her own regrets of kind of getting started with something that was all consuming earlier than maybe she intended.
Yeah.
But
I just saw that Dana asked, did you ever consider Katie?
That's what I was going to lead up to. Did you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes is the answer to that question. I didn't know until about halfway through the book which way it was going to go. There was a version where she ended up with Adam, and there was a version where she ended up with Eric, because they were saying two very different things. The version where she ended up with Adam was saying, Mom's not here anymore, and now I have the freedom to live a life that is more authentic to who I am, and the life that I've been leading is the one that was really sort of a replica of hers, and that I want to live a different life now. And then the one I ultimately landed on was like, no, I haven't just been living Carol's life. I've been living my own life, but I've been narrating it in the way that it has been Carol's life. And now it's time for me to actually return to my life, but to own the choices that I have always made and to name them now as my own.
It looks like some of the readers were not rooting for Adam.
Yeah.
But I liked how you explained it, that it really wasn't about Adam before or after. It was really more about Katie and Katie's authentic life, and not for Adam's sake, but for her own sake.
That's right.
And as for her own sake, he was a part of that, which to me is very different than if she had decided to go back to Adam out of some sense of obligation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
The difference, again, kind of another parallel between Carol saying, well, I should go back because I have a child and that's the right thing to do. That's what a good mother would do, versus I want to go back because I love my baby and because I want to be with her. And I needed this time to really see that for myself.
Yeah.
Two very different, the same end game, but two very different mentalities to get there. For sure. And I noticed that one of our readers, Rita, noticed that she had really liked the way that your writing style, and she knows there were two different sayings that you had in the book on page. She even noted the page 175, and she wanted to know if they were something that you had heard before, or you had been was like an inspirational saying, or was something you came up on your own. And two were, one I thought I recognized, the other I wasn't sure. What got you here won't get you there, which I thought sounded familiar. Yeah. And then the other one was, there is more to life than just continuing to do what we know.
Well, I mean, what got you here won't get you there is something that I've heard, like, different sort of like, I don't know, self-help people talk about, I guess you could say.
Employee workplace. I hear it all the time in the workplace. Yeah. About how if you got, like when I got a promotion to assistant manager, if I want to get promoted beyond that role, what got me to this role won't get me to the next role.
That's right.
That's right. My relation to it.
Yeah. So that I've heard a lot. And the second one, what was the second one? I'm sorry.
There is more to life than just continuing to do what we know.
Oh, I mean, I don't think that's a particularly original thought, but it like in that phraseology, I think that came from me.
Yeah, yeah. And I felt like that was one that I hadn't heard as, wasn't as easily recognizable, but I think both of them were very true to the story. So in no way were you weren't plagiarizing anything, or if anything, you were taking kind of these concepts, these thoughts, and they very much applied to the situations and
Yeah.
to the characters in a very personal way.
Yeah.
Rather than just as, kind of, it wasn't so much, it didn't feel as much like a platitude as it felt like, take a look at what we're looking here at this life and these characters. And these are really true sentiments that Katie's going to have to apply if she wants to grow beyond just the small existence that she has.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you for elevating some of those platitudes.
You got it.
New level. Because, sometimes people say things and you're like, but what does that really mean? But I felt like you really gave it context so that then someone could read what was going on around those words and think, well, here's a person who is trying to live through these statements, trying to live beyond what she knows or what she held on to before. So I really enjoyed that. I think I read, if I'm not mistaken, and you did read about it a little bit in the book, you and your mother go to Positano and stay in the Hotel Poseidon. Did this all happen right after COVID?
Well, so in the summer of 2019, I took a trip to Rome with my mom.
Oh,
and my mom, like Carol, had always talked about this magical summer she spent in Rome and also in Positano. And she was 20 years old when she went, and she fell in love with this man named Ramo. And I had always heard about Ramo. And my parents are very happily married. They've been married for a long time. But we ended up finding Ramo on Facebook, and they met at the Trevi Fountain, which is the place that they had met like 50 years beforehand. And he gave her this like silver love charm that she had given him all of those like many summers ago. And we just sat in this coffee shop and chatted with him. And I just remember feeling like I was seeing the young woman inside my mom, like I was getting to see, like, she was a little bit like shy and nervous and things that my mom is not, but she was meeting this man that she had loved when she was 20 years old. And so, so we had that experience in Italy, and I remember thinking, or experience in Rome, I mean, Italy, but Rome. And I remember thinking, like, I need to write this somehow. Like, this is too good of an idea to like go to Italy and meet your mom's old boyfriend. And then I went on to Positano to meet up with some friends, and my mom went home. And Positano is such a specific place in that it really is, I think, one of the few places in the world you actually could set this story, because you need somewhere that's a little bit like sectioned off from the rest of society in the way that Positano is. Like, for instance, there's only one road that leads in and out of town, so there's not that many cars, which would be like very key to a story where you were trying to pull off that someone didn't know what kind of what time they were in. And Italy itself is such an old, it is a society that really doesn't change that much. And I also, like, I wrote this book from April to June of 2020, and I was really comforted by this idea. I mean, both, it was really fun because every day I felt like I was like on vacation, and I obviously, like the rest of us, couldn't leave my house. I was also comforted, by this idea that like there is this real timelessness to Italy and to the Italian culture. This idea that hundreds of years go by and like society just sort of prevails. Like, we were in the middle of that crisis, and it was sort of like, yeah, and then life goes on. Like, life is going to go on. Like, this isn't the end. It's going to continue. Like, civilizations have risen and fallen, and we've been through plagues and all kinds of things, and life prevails. And so, and I think Italians really, like, you feel that history in Italy in this really particular way. And so the combination of those things. And also Positano, it's like all the hotels are the same as the ones that were there 50 years ago, all the restaurants, like it's really a place that has like been very untouched by time. And that was obviously very important from the story, both from like just a practical standpoint, that so that Katie, even before I knew she was going to be in the 90s, just this idea that she could return to actual like place and location that her mom had been to. And then also from a thematic level, that there are these touchstones that remain unchanged.
It's like, I have to say, it's like the book wrote itself, which it didn't, but two, my goodness. I mean, it's just like all the stars aligned. It's like you wanted a place that was, kind of insular in its own way, and kind of, its own kind of space, kind of separated out from, hustle and bustle maybe of some other parts of Italy. And then that dovetailed so neatly into the fact that there weren't cars immediately giving clues to, where she was in time. It's just so neat how all the, like I think, all the things dovetailed to work out, that you were clearly meant to write this story. And I appreciate that, you were inspired by your mom to write this story, and you used the knowledge and the experiences that you've gotten from your friends who had lost their mothers, of what those grieving stages would look like, and how your perspective just ultimately, whether you want it to or not, has to shift. So that's just, it's just magical how that all came together, and how I'm not like 300 pounds heavier having read this book, because every time I picked up the book, I was like, okay, now I want to eat some pasta, and I want to drink wine, and I want to book myself a ticket to Italy, whether the hubby and the daughter want to go or not. I'm just going to hop on the plane and go. We were talking about how much it felt like the very best travel brochure. I mean, the Hotel Poseidon must be beside itself, because a whole bunch of people signing up to stay there, then I'll be stunned.
Yes,
I mean, it's like you're walking into the story.
I got to go back there last summer, the summer of 2022, and I stayed at the Hotel Poseidon, and there were so many people who were reading the book there, like both in the town and then also at the hotel. And it was very, it was a experience that I will treasure forever. This like getting to go to a place and seeing a town, just like so many people had this novel. It was very special. I'll remember it forever.
You should, because now, that there are so many books out there that I can think of. A book that was written in a much different way, in a much darker subject matter, that popped right into my head was Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, which of course is based on true crime. But you go to Savannah, which is 2 hours north of where I am, and people want to go to all the different places in the book. And I feel like One Italian Summer is going to be the same way. They're going to be like, well, she wrote about these places. I'm going to go, and I'm going to go on a little scavenger hunt, and I'm going to follow along.
They all exist like this.
Pizza, and
I have the paperback cover here, and this terrace is like replicated after the terrace at the Hotel Poseidon. So the chairs look the same, and this is sort of like the way their terrace
looks. The newer cover, because I think the original cover looked like this.
Yeah, this is the paperback cover.
Yes.
Yeah, this is the paperback cover. But anyway, this is the Hotel Poseidon terrace, which is kind of fun that we got to put that on there. And all the places in the book are real places. They all really exist.
Well, I know I want to ask a million more questions, and I can't eat up too much more of your time. So the last two biggies are, so you've gotten the movie rights, I think, for One Italian Summer, and in 5 years, right? Aren't both going to be adapted?
Yes.
Like biggies or streaming?
The answer is we don't know yet. It depends on so many different things. They will both be films, but we just don't know. It depends on budget and cast and just how it all shakes out. And I don't know if anyone here is aware, but we're in the middle of a writer's strike not in California. We're in the middle of a writer's strike in Hollywood, which means there's a guild that covers screenwriting. And that guild has like run out its contract with the studios, and so the writers have gone on strike to get certain things that we feel that we deserve from studios. And so no one, it's like pencils down, like no one is allowed to write or adapt or any of that. So those projects are on pause until, obviously like this is a cause that's much bigger than me or any particular project of mine, but the book stuff continues on. So yes, I will. And I'll also have, I'll have, I think more information fairly shortly about what's coming next for me in novels as well.
Oh, fantastic. Well, you have my email address. So I'm going to want to hear all the details, because we were trying to put together our own dream cast. Is there anybody that you have in your mind that you're hoping for, or anything or maybe that's too dangerous a question. So a better question would be, is there anything in the book that if you have the say, you do not want it to be taken out?
I actually, honestly, I would say what it is that you said. That scene of Katie and Carol, the last scene with Katie and Carol is my favorite scene in the book, where they have lunch. They have a drink and they talk, and then they're sort of like across this way as the sun is setting, on their like last moment together. And Carol says, like, is it true what you said to me? Like, did I leave you? And Katie says, no, you never did. That to me is like the heart of the book. And
I think that gets to the core of love, that you can, be disappointed, and you can feel betrayed, and you can feel all manner of things. But, if there's truly a strong core of love at the end,
it's all that matters.
That's really what it's all going to come back to. The other stuff is just details. It's just minutia.
That's right.
The bigger thread of it is, what was my bigger experience with this person?
Right.
And so I'm crossing my fingers that not only that stays in there, that you get some actresses in there that can really. I loved hearing, like I said, I know it's Lauren Graham, but I loved hearing Lorelai Gilmore tell the story. I had Rory in my head as Katie, and Carol as Lauren Graham. Do you know either of them personally, or how did you get Lauren to do the audiobook?
I do. I know Lauren personally. She's lovely. She's really.
Oh my God. My mother and I watched Gilmore Girls together.
Yeah, she's everything you'd want her to be. So we've become friends, and that's really lovely.
Oh, that is incredible. It's like 6 degrees of Kevin going on right here. That's so cool. Right. Like you're like my own literary rock star. You like know all these people, and you know them on a first name basis. Whereas to me,
very kind.
And so our final question of the day, because of course the one thing that's exciting about reading an author that you love is knowing, is there more?
Yes.
Is there a new book in the works? Can you tell us anything about it? Any breadcrumbs?
There's a new book in the works. You will know more about it sometime over the summer. I will say that within 5 years, I wrote about like platonic love, like the deep love between two friends. And One Italian Summer, I wrote about familial love, like the deep love between a mother and daughter. And with the new novel, I'm writing about romantic love. Romantic love is the center of the book. So it's definitely a romance in that way. And I'm excited to share it.
Romance is hot. Romance is hot. Do you have any idea maybe when it might come out? We can buy it up for our library?
I do, but I can't say quite yet.
Well, some things have to stay under wraps.
That's
Sometimes
right.
you can't know everything, but you do have a website. I believe you're on Instagram and Facebook.
Yes.
So
You can find me on
there's
Instagram.
no excuse for people not to follow up on the details.
No, you can find me on Instagram, and that's where you will find any book news. Rebecca _Serle. That's where you can find me on Instagram, and that's where you will find out about the new book. And I also have RebeccaSerle.com, but RebeccaSerle.com tends to lag. RebeccaSerle.com is really good for like book club signups and pre-orders of the book and all of those kind of things. But for news, you definitely want to poke around my Instagram, because that's where you'll hear things.
That's where the information is. So readers, you've heard it straight from the author's mouth. Get on Instagram, or as the Gen Z kids call it, Insta. If you have a grandchild in your life, or even someone who's a youngin, I guess youngins these days are those in their 20s. That's been a while for me. Those are the people to connect to, because they can help you get set up with that.
That's right.
So This has been wonderful. This has been
Oh,
amazing. Like I
wonderful.
said, I could just keep on chatting, but of course, you've got things to do, books to write. Is there
That's right.
anything else you want to share with us before we let you go back out into the wonderful world of Los Angeles?
That's it. Just thank you so much. And thank you all so much for being here today. This was a really lovely chat. Thank you. And have a great day, everybody.
All right. Well, thank you so much again, Rebecca. I'll be in touch. And I've written down Motherless Daughters and the new book on the way, Romantic Club. And we can't wait to buy up some library. Thank you so much for giving us your time
Thank
today.
you. Thanks for your support. Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.